Those of you that aren't particularly keen on the Audi e-Tron will no doubt quite like this video. Here's 5 things about the 2021 Audi e-Tron 55 that I've been driving for the past couple of thousand miles that I hate. I definitely see more hate comments about it than positive ones, so I'm sure this video will be popular. First up, it is the size. It's unnecessarily large, and the vast majority of the time there's absolutely no need for it to be quite as huge as it is. Now, of course, this is massively subjective, and I'm sure some of you will come at me with, well, you shouldn't have chosen such a big car if you didn't like it. And that might well be fair enough. Don't get me wrong, I've driven vehicles of all shapes and sizes. I've driven large vans for a living at times, and I'm not scared of a big car. What I do find though is a lot of car parks, particularly multi-stories, but also Instavolt, I'm kind of coming for you with your charging bays as well. They just aren't made for these huge SUVs that are blighting our roads. It's nearly 5 metres long and just under 2 metres wide, and you'll feel every millimetre when you're trying to wedge it into some 70s concrete monstrosity of a car park. I hate to think how you'd get on trying to get it in a typical new build garage. I think you'd definitely develop less of a fat than I am to be able to get out of it, of that I'm certain. This trend for making cars ever wider is becoming an issue. Our roads and parking spaces certainly aren't getting any bigger, but our cars definitely are. So I think the e-Tron could do to lose a few pounds. And really, it is a little bit of a negative point. It's just excessively large, I think. Next up, number 2, that charging port location. Now, I've said about this a few times now, but it needs saying again. The person who decided that a logical place to put the charging port on this car was behind the driver's side front wheel is an absolute mentalist. It makes absolutely no sense, and the biggest problem you'll ever have charging an e-Tron is the charging port position. We know that the charging performance is absolutely fantastic, but if you can't plug it in because the cable's too short and it doesn't reach the stupid place they've put the port, it's not any good, is it? They almost redeemed themselves by putting a second port on the passenger side, but the fact it's only Type 2 and not CCS means it's of little use when you're out and about, when the placement's actually likely to be a problem for you. Charger operators, of course, position most of their chargers for cars with ports at the front. So you'd probably be a little bit knackered either way, no matter what side you could charge from. I know that the Jaguar I-Pace has the charging port in roughly the same place on the other side of the car. And I don't know if I-Pace owners have any better experience, to be honest. If you've got an I-Pace, tell me in the comments. Is it just as awkward as the e-Tron? I'm guessing it probably is. I note that the Q4 e-Tron, this car's smaller, newer sibling, has the charging port at the rear in a similar position to where a fuel filler would be. I'm not sure that's much of an improvement either, really, since it could still prove awkward in some locations, and I've certainly found that with the BMW i3. So manufacturers, please stop putting charging ports in stupid places. Can we just agree on a standard and everybody stick to it, rather than everybody just seemingly making it up as they go along, because it's just awful. But charging operators, you're not exempt from some of the blame here. Stop fitting stupidly short cables and consider the fact that some cars have ports in stupid places and allow for that with what you're providing. And that's that rant over, I guess. But I'm sure it will return at some point. Number 3, sometimes it's just a little bit too clever for its own good. I'm not sure this is actually specific to the e-Tron. I think you could say the same thing about most new cars, and not just electric ones. And what I'm on about here is some of the driver safety assistance systems. I didn't ever have any trouble with the auto braking or anything like that. No phantom braking, no false alarms. That side of things actually okay. Thankfully, never even managed to activate the sort of emergency braking, so that's a good sign, I think. It's not a system that you want to use. But the lane assist I find really, really annoying. It defaults to being on every time you start the ignition, and you need to press the button on the end of the indicator stalk to turn it off. Otherwise, it'll try to intervene by vibrating the steering wheel, steering you a little bit should you get a bit too close to the white line. And that's absolutely fine on the motorway, and I think that's what these systems have been absolutely designed for. But it's a little bit of pain if you're driving a little bit more spiritedly on an A road, you're taking the racing line maybe, and I'm sure there's a setting somewhere to turn it off a little bit more permanently. But systems like this that just keep insisting on turning themselves back on really, really irritate me. If I've turned it off, keep it off. Now, I'm sure there probably is something buried deep in the menu that lets me turn it off. I haven't quite got there. I'm sure I will at some point. But I'm also pretty sure the car will end up going back by the time I've been bothered looking for that option. It also has a really weird warning for low visibility. It bongs and it brings up a warning on the instrument cluster that says low visibility. And now it seems to do this, should there even be like a slight bit of drizzle, or it's suddenly maybe a little bit darker than it was if the weather's a bit crap. Not necessarily poor visibility. I'm not talking about like fog or like really bad rain or anything like that. Maybe just the slightest change in visibility. Now, I know if visibility is bad because I'm looking out the windscreen and it'll tell me that, right? So I'm not sure why I need a warning to tell me that the visibility is bad. And like I said, sometimes it's just a bit too clever for its own good. And that's really, really irritating. Number 4, it's a real head turner. Maybe a little bit too much. Now, that's a bit of a weird thing to add in a list of things I don't like about a car. But I have noticed, as weird as it sounds, that if I'm parked up somewhere, like waiting, like even parked up outside the house, the other day I parked up taking a phone call in the car, and everybody, I live in quite a prominent public place, there's a lot of people walking past it. Every single person almost that walks past turns round and has a good look at it. And I just find that a bit cringy. I don't like the idea of having a car that everybody wants to stare at and is like, oh, look at that. And I don't know, it maybe a lot of people that buy cars like this do want that, and they do want people to see them, and they want people to be like, oh, look at him and his big fancy Audi. But I have noticed more than any other car I've ever driven, a lot of people are very interested in it. Maybe that's a good thing for EV adoption, right? Maybe that interest is a good thing. But maybe it's just a little bit too flash and a bit too in your face. I can't quite decide. I'd actually really welcome your opinion on that in the comments. What do you think? Have you experienced that with a particular car where, it's a real head turner, but actually you didn't really want it to be? I mean, at the end of the day, it's just like an SUV, right? And for me, it's just a means of getting from A to B. It's not a sports car. It's not really an object of desire. And maybe it should be at the kind of price it is. And actually, maybe if I'd spent that amount of money myself on it, I'd want it to be. But I just wish it would, tone it down a little bit. But who knows? And last but not least, number 5. And now you're going to moan at me about this one as well. It is the price. Now, obviously, right, I'm not necessarily saying that this car is bad value for money. It's a massive luxury SUV with all the creature comforts you could ever need, and it costs, for a 55, at least 80 grand. And a little bit more if you want to add some options to give it what you want. So for me, it'd definitely be adaptive cruise, maybe some other stuff. Haven't really spent any time with the configurator. Maybe I should do. And that is a staggering amount of money to pay for a car. Do I think the e-Tron is bad value for money? I'm not sure. I do. I mean, it's a lot of money. I'm not sure that just because something's expensive automatically means it's not good value for money. I think it's very, very difficult. It's very, very short-sighted to say that just anything that's premium and expensive is automatically not good value for money. I think it's in a world where you can buy like an MG for just over 20 grand and get yourself a very, very capable electric car, one that might be a little bit rough around the edges, like I covered in my reviews of my ZS EV. That spending 4 times that, does that represent value for money? I don't know. But that's not what I mean when I say I have a problem with the price. The problem I have with the price is that this is a car that I really, really like, that has great charging performance and has all those other things that I really liked about it. Now, if you haven't seen that video yet, you might want to check it out, the 5 things that I really love about the e-Tron 55. But my real problem is to get a car that performs the way it does, has the level of refinement it does, and charges the way it does. It's going to cost me 80 grand, and that's, I find it really difficult to get my head around. I really hope that over time the prices come down a bit and you can get this level of refinement for a bit less money. I might be dreaming, it might not be going to happen, and before you tell me to buy a Tesla, it just doesn't compare. It's just not the same experience. Yes, you have the supercharger network, so you probably have the charging performance nailed, because obviously they charge very fast, and then you have the availability, improvements as well. But build quality, overall experience, and refinement and stuff, it's just not there. And you cannot tell me that I should just go and buy a Model 3 because it's half the price. It's not the same. But if you could get something that was anywhere near this level of refinement for a bit less money, I'd be very, very interested to know about it. I don't know what the I-Pace is like, because I think they were there about 60 grand, aren't they? So I don't know if that's a start, if that's moving in the right direction. I don't know if the Audi Q4 might be the answer to the question, because you can buy them for about 40, between 42 and sort of 60, depending on your spec. So maybe the Q4 is the answer. Maybe that will give you this sort of level of refinement for a bit less money, or at least a close estimate. It'll get there a little bit. I really don't know. And I would welcome your opinions in the comments, but if you're going to tell me that I need to buy a Tesla, I'm just not buying it, I'm sorry. That's all we've got time for. Those are the 5 things that I dislike the most about this Audi e-Tron 55. I'm really quite keen on it, really quite taken on it, but of course, it's not perfect. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.